Revenge films.
My sister Michelle has a very severe wheat allergy, to the point where if she has anything contaminated with wheat, her life would be on the line. So my family has always been very careful when it came to our meals. Wheat is found in a lot more things than you might expect. So everything like commercial curry paste, dumpling skins, processed meats, noodles were all out of the question. Anytime we would neglect to read the ingredients list carefully, my sister's face would blow up bright red like a tomato. Depending on the amount, her entire body might turn red, and her throat would swell up, and she would not be able to breathe. One day, my sister told us that she got a boyfriend. I had met him once before too, and he seemed really nice, a very manly man. Most importantly, he seemed to understand my sister's allergy and was very sensitive to her needs. My sister and her boyfriend had a steady relationship for a year, and things were becoming serious as marriage was becoming a part of the conversation. One day, he came to our house to meet our parents.
I would like to ask for your permission and blessing to marry your daughter Michelle. I promise to make her happy.
Our daughter is at the age where we'd love for her to get married. For her to have found such a wonderful partner like you, we couldn't be more grateful. But, well, you know, honey.
Yes, our daughter's wheat allergy requires so much care that any small oversight can really cost her her life. You have to pay close attention to the smallest of details, and it can be hard to go out to eat too. You may suffer as a result of this, so are you really sure that you're happy to take care of her and are able to make the sacrifices needed?
Of course! As long as she's my wife, I will put my life on the line protecting Michelle and keeping her safe.
In that case, it may cause you some difficulty in the future, but we look forward to welcoming you into our family.
And my parents gladly approved of my sister's marriage. 1 week later during the weekend, the two of them went to her boyfriend's house next to give them the news of the marriage. Her boyfriend had bragged about his mother's cooking for a long time, so she was really looking forward to meeting them and going to their house. They drove for some time and arrived in a very rural place. It was covered in acres and acres of glistening golden wheat fields. At that point, my sister had apparently already started showing symptoms of her wheat allergy, but the symptoms were far less severe than when she ingested, so she powered through and they arrived at his parents' house. However, shortly after the introductions, his mother said something outrageous.
This rural era is really putting their strength in developing wheat right now. Domestically produced wheat has been getting a lot of attention lately, and there are orders flying in from other states all across the country.
Did you say wheat?
Yes, and I've also been making bread using this homegrown wheat, and a lot of stores are starting to carry it too. That's why I would love for you to please try out the most popular bread and our newest products of bread too, Michelle.
Bread? I'm very, very grateful for the offer, but I'm afraid I'm allergic to wheat and...
My sister panicked and apologized as she declined the offer, but,
Oh, one bite won't hurt, right?
and they wouldn't back down.
No, even one bite will kill me.
She tried to explain, but
How can you say something like that? As if I'm trying to poison you. I'm not even an evil mother-in-law.
and she started tearing up. Then the father chimed in.
Michelle, don't worry. The bread has been baked and so there shouldn't be any issues.
It was clear that they were not understanding, and Michelle didn't know what to do. They must have thought that as long as it's baked, the wheat allergy no longer exists.
You see? Even if it's been baked or cooked, a wheat allergy will cause a reaction regardless.
She was doing her best, but
Hey now, Michelle. You're 25 years old already. You shouldn't be such a picky eater. You keep saying you have an allergy, but you're just saying that because you don't want to eat it, right? I'm telling you that the bread that my wife makes is really delicious, so please, why don't you just try a little? Seriously, do you think my mom is trying to kill you or something? She wouldn't do something so movie dramatic like that.
my sister was pressured from all sides, with the father and brother really pushing. She didn't know what to do and looked to her boyfriend for help. Without a word against his brother or father, her boyfriend just said,
Look, I'm sorry. Can you just bear with us this one time and eat it? You know, angering my mom wouldn't be in your favor either, right?
he said in a small voice to her. My sister realized that the narrative had changed. They were accusing her boyfriend's mother of having evil intentions and trying to poison her, and that they were looking at her as just a spoiled picky eater. Even during this conversation, there was wheat flying around the house, and my sister's skin was already turning red and itchy. Her throat was already becoming itchy too, and if she were to stay there any longer, it was only a matter of time before she would go into anaphylactic shock. Her face went pale, and she got up and said,
I need to go home.
and grabbed her bag to leave.
How awful! I wanted to get along with you, Michelle, and that's why I put so much effort into making this bread.
And his mother started sobbing on the spot. The brother and the father sat there, glaring at my sister resentfully, but the mother, who was crying hysterically, didn't seem to have a single tear falling from her face. Suddenly, her boyfriend grabbed my sister's arm, refusing to let her leave.
Michelle, cut it out with the childishness. All you have to do is have one bite and that's it, you know? Just come here and try a bite of this. Here! If you can't eat it, we're breaking up!
He had my sister pinned in one hand and a piece of bread in the other, as he forced the bread into her mouth. My sister's mouth immediately swelled up into a balloon.
I don't want to die in a place like this.
This ran through my sister's mind as she kicked off her boyfriend, spat out the bread, and made a run for it.
We can pretend like this never happened,
she said, and ran out of the house without even putting her shoes on. Not only did her boyfriend not come chasing after her, he came outside and yelled,
Stop with this foolishness! You'll never even get a taxi around here!
On the other hand, her brother came chasing after her at full speed. The brother started off with speed, but my sister was running as her life depended on it, and when he wasn't able to catch up, he eventually gave up. My sister ran and ran until she saw some kind of light, and she was able to fall into a taxi that was stopped at the convenience store and finally made it home. Inside of the taxi, my sister was sobbing, and the taxi driver was so worried about her that he accompanied her all the way to our door. My sister was in shambles by the way she arrived home. Her face and body were bright red from her allergy. Her face was a disaster from crying so much. Her hair was all over the place, and since she ran barefoot, she was covered in dirt and grass.
What did they do to you?
My family was livid. My sister explained what had happened through her tears, and it tipped us all over the edge. It would be one thing that if they tried to feed it to her without knowing, but this was straight up attempted murder. My sister's phone was already flooded by texts and missed calls from her boyfriend.
If we get married, you would need to move into my parents' house and help my mother bake bread for the family business. That's why I just wanted you to help you get over your wheat allergy, that's all.
Since when was it decided that my sister would move in with her boyfriend's family? Just as our family was looking back through all the messages, her cell phone rang again, and my dad answered the phone. Apparently, the boyfriend didn't realize that my father was the one who picked up the phone, and I could hear him yelling on the other end while my dad remained silent.
Hey, Michelle, are you even listening? How about you try responding for once if you're there?
Her boyfriend kept yelling, so my dad finally broke his silence and quietly replied,
It seems like you were trying to kill my daughter. Isn't that right?
he said in an ice-cold tone. There was a brief pause as my sister's boyfriend seemed to realize that it was not in fact Michelle who had answered the phone, followed by a long silence.
Was your mother's mood more important than my daughter's life? Don't you dare come anywhere near my daughter ever again, you murderer!
He then passed the phone to my mom.
If you try to come anywhere near my daughter again, I promise you'll regret it. Do you understand me?
And without another word from the other side, we heard the phone line cut out.
Ugh!
My mom angrily let out of her mouth,
That bastard hung up! Are you kidding me?
and immediately dialed him back. No matter how many times she tried calling, he didn't answer the phone, but after she rang over and over again, around the 20th time, he finally picked up. From there, my mom and dad went full blast on him. My boyfriend switched roles and tried to play the damsel in distress, asking for my sister to come back to him, but her boyfriend had become a symbol of trauma to her, and my sister refused. Her boyfriend tried to complain about the situation to his colleagues and friends and make my sister out to be the bad guy, but of course, nobody took his side. And instead, everybody was shocked and took their distance from him. The rumor got around to his boss, who has a daughter with an allergy, and apparently he was lectured for hours on end by him. However, instead of taking responsibility or showing any regret, the boyfriend got angry in return and quit his job on the spot. Nobody tried to stop him, so he became unemployed and went back to his parents' house. Just one time after that, the boyfriend's mom called my house
It's only because I didn't know. Please forgive my son.
and was crying on the phone to my mom, but my mom replied,
A woman's fake cry will never work on another woman.
she said, and hung up the phone on her. To make matters worse for them, the taxi driver that helped my sister had also been spreading the story, and her boyfriend's family was labeled a family of murderers by everyone in their small rural town. Of course, that meant that the bread that his mother was making also got bad ratings, and not only did everybody stop buying them, but the shops that had been selling it canceled all of their orders. Her boyfriend tried to start a new venture of cultivating wheat on his own, but nobody would sell him the land, and he still remains unemployed. The younger brother was working at a wheat processing factory, but all of his colleagues also heard about the story and shunned him, causing him to quit. I heard he hasn't left the house since. The father was apparently working at a government office, and he received a stern warning from his boss, and also had the residents talking about him everywhere he went. No matter how ostracized he was, no one else in his family was able to get a job, so he had no choice but to continue working. But, they try to take somebody's life. I think they're getting exactly what they deserve.
Ever since I was little, my father was always drowning himself in alcohol, and taking money from the house to go gambling. My mother was fed up with him, and she left the house suddenly one day, leaving me behind too. I, Alan, was left with no choice but to live with my father alone. One day, that father of mine came home with a little girl out of nowhere. The girl's name was Sarah. Sarah was filthy, and she smelled really bad too. "Why don't you go take a shower first?" I said, and she slowly made her way to the bathroom. But when Sarah came out of the shower, I was surprised at what I saw. Once she was cleaned up and had the dirt washed off of her, there was a beautiful little girl with a pretty face standing in her place. Then I heard a loud grumbling noise from Sarah's stomach. "You haven't eaten anything?"
Yeah.
I thought Sarah might be in her first years of elementary school, but it turns out that she was actually already 10 years old. I had just turned 13, so we were only 3 years apart, but must not have been fed properly up until now. She was short, but also extremely scrawny, and her gestures seemed immature, which made her look even younger than she actually was. If you don't mind having the fried rice that I made, I can give you some.
Yeah.
When I put the plate in front of her, Sarah scarfed it down like her life depended on it. "You don't need to eat so fast. There's plenty left, too. How long has it been since your last meal?"
I've been living in the park or along the riverbanks, and sometimes my mom would bring back bread crusts for us. That's what I would eat, and sometimes even out of the trash.
That's enough. So you were homeless.
Yeah, that's right. I found this kid on the streets.
As I was talking to Sarah, my father jumped into our conversation, and I was finally able to hear what was going on. Turns out that Sarah's father lost at a gambling bet to my father, and instead of paying the $200, he left his daughter with my dad. To make matters worse, that was the first time they'd ever met, so we didn't know anything about who he is or where he came from. But to bring home a little girl in exchange for $200 didn't make any sense at all, nor did it seem right. I couldn't just sit by and let this happen, so I tried to contact the police. Then, Sarah ran over to me and grabbed my hand with the phone.
Please let me stay here. I'll do anything. Please don't kick me out. Please.
Sarah started crying as she begged me. "What are we going to do, Dad?"
Why don't you decide? We can't just leave her here to do nothing and eat our food.
What is that supposed to mean? At that time, I was still in middle school and powerless, so for the time being, I decided to have Sarah help out around the house. Sarah was smart and a fast learner, so she was quick to pick up on easy tasks and house chores, and made my life a lot easier. My dad had never had a proper job, nor was he really working, and when I became high school age, completely stopped trying at all. In his place, I had to switch my high school to a night school, and during the day I would go to work as the main support of the household. That being said, I was still a high school student, so my salary was really low. My father would take my earnings and spend them on gambling or alcohol. We were barely getting by the skin of our teeth, and no matter how much Sarah was helping around the house, we were still in an incredibly difficult situation. Despite the circumstances, I somehow made it through high school and graduated. I turned 18, and Sarah was 15. I wanted to be able to give Sarah a better life, so I decided to go work away from home to earn money. But when I told her that,
You're going to leave me here?
"I'm going away to earn more money. I promise I'll come back from time to time." Sarah made a really conflicted face and she went silent. "My father will be here, so she won't be alone. I wonder what she's so worried about." I didn't think too much of it, but it was a lot worse than I imagined. As soon as my father left the house, Sarah said something shocking to me.
Hey, Alan.
It was clear something was wrong with Sarah. I figured it would have been something that was hard for her to talk about, so I stood still and waited for a while. What she said next sent chills down my spine.
Dad, he does things to me. He touches me in places that I don't like. So I don't want to be left alone with him. I'm scared.
What? I couldn't believe the words that just came out of Sarah's mouth. My mind went blank for a moment. I thought maybe I misheard her, but it was the horrifying truth. Whenever I wasn't home, my father was harassing Sarah, 15-year-old Sarah. I stormed straight over to where my father was, and when I found him, "What is this all about? Is it true that you've been touching Sarah?"
Damn it! I guess she opened her mouth. What's the matter? Sarah and I are related. She isn't my daughter.
My blood
spoiled and my father who seemed to show no guilt. Before I knew it, I punched him with all my strength. I ran back home to Sarah. Sarah, listen very closely to what I'm about to say.
Yes? What is it?
This is what Dad is doing to you? Then I think we need to go to child services or anywhere that can keep you safe. They could probably help you, and maybe even put you in a child care center so that you don't have to stay here.
What? But why? I want to stay with you, Alan. I thought you were my brother.
You can't! I have to go and earn money. This is the only option that I could think of. If you go to the care center, you'll still be able to go to school. And I think this is the best chance for you. I know this is a little too late, but I was also still a kid, and I didn't know this was happening. And I don't know what else we can do. I'm sorry.
I understand. But when I become an adult, can I come find you, Alan?
Of course. That's why I need you to stay somewhere safe. You can't be in a terrible place like this anymore.
Okay.
I had no choice but to put my faith into the government. So I took Sarah with me and had her put into the care center. I left my dad at home and decided to leave the house. He tried to stop me.
If you don't stay here and work for me, what am I supposed to do? You better send me money at least.
You're no longer my father. I want nothing to do with you. You can live and die as you please. Doesn't matter to me anymore. Sarah isn't your toy, you scumbag! And I left the house behind forever. 2 years after I had left the house and started working, I got a phone call from my father that he wasn't feeling well. He wanted me to come home, but I ignored him. I don't know where he got the money from, but my father never stopped drinking or gambling and fell deeper into the hole, living a miserable life. Because of that, his health was a disaster. He lost a lot of weight, and he was discovered dead by one of his neighbors, with his organs and insides long dead before him. The news made its way to me, and as his son, I was asked if I wanted to hold a funeral, but I couldn't accept someone who would do something like that to Sarah as my father, so I just left it. I didn't feel anything towards my father, nor did I shed a tear. I could forget whatever he did to me, but what he did to Sarah, I could never forgive. Sarah would sometimes pop into my mind, but if anything, I wanted her to be able to forget the son of a scumbag like that and live happily on her own. Then one day, about 6 months later, front doorbell rang. And when I went to open the door, it was Sarah standing there.
Alan, I've been looking for you all this time.
She said through tears in her eyes. She stared at me before jumping into my arms. What? What are you doing here?
Ever since I graduated high school, I've been looking for you all this time. And then I finally found someone who said they knew you, and they told me that this is where you live.
I hadn't seen Sarah in years, and she was still a young girl. But standing in front of me was a proud young woman who'd become even more beautiful than she was before. She was definitely not the same filthy little girl from when I first met her. She was put together and had become far prettier than any random B-list celebrity.
I wanted to see you all this time. And I also heard about Dad, too. Why didn't you come see me? Why didn't you try to find me? You never contacted me, not once.
I thought it was better that, as the son of the person who did something like that to you, that I wasn't anywhere near you. I wanted you to go and be happy without having to remember any of that.
But don't you know that I can't be happy without you, Alan? You can't assume my feelings like that.
I'm sorry.
I didn't want to be separated from you, but I went into the care center, believing that someday I would get to see you again. I thought that when I graduated high school, we would get to live together again, but you never came back for me, so I went looking for you. I love you, Alan, so please let me be by your side.
But I'm not good looking, nor did I go to college or have a good education. And look at you now. You would be wasted on me.
You were the best brother in the world, and I always thought that you were the best guy in the world. You accepted me back then, no matter what I look like. That's why there's no one else for me but you. You're the only person I've ever wanted. I want to become a real family with you.
Sarah hugged me even tighter. Are you sure? I'm not worthy of you.
You're the only one for me.
2 years later, the two of us got married. And we even had a baby together. I worked extremely hard for my family, and eventually we were able to buy a house. Sarah became popular in our neighborhood for her beauty. My colleagues at work were always teasing me.
How did a guy like you get a beautiful bride like her?
But if I told them the true story behind it all, I'm sure they wouldn't know what to say. Sarah had a tough life, full of unimaginable pain and horror. That's why I want to make sure that every single day I shower her with love and happiness, protect my family with everything that I've got.
My name is Amy, and I just got married 2 months ago. I get along great with my husband, and I was very happy, but there was one problem. It had to do with my husband's parents. My husband has an older brother, and his parents favored his brother over him. But now that my husband has a stable job with a good pay, his parents ask him for money regularly. My husband couldn't say no to his parents, so he ended up sending large sums of money to them every month.
It's natural for children to pay money to their parents after they grow up and get a job. It's the least that they could do.
This is what my mother-in-law would always say to my husband. As for my husband's older brother, he still lived at home with his parents and was unemployed. My parents-in-law showered my brother-in-law with love just because he was the firstborn, and he ended up growing up to be a spoiled and ungrateful person. One day, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. It was the end of December. Hello? How are you? Nice of you to call.
I'm calling about our annual family gathering.
My in-laws insisted that we come visit them during the winter holiday season each year. My mother-in-law asked when we would be visiting them this year. We plan to come over on New Year's Eve.
Can't you come over earlier? Say the 29th? That's when you came last year.
Well, did you hear that Alan's been promoted and he needs to work? He's too busy to take any time off of work. As always, my mother-in-law claimed that we never told her anything and she became angry.
How come you never tell us these important things? Don't you consider us to be your family? You're both being very disrespectful. But I guess I could be happy about the fact that Alan got promoted.
So this year, it will be just me. If he has time, Alan may come over at the last minute.
All right. If he needs to work, I guess there was nothing that we could do about it. As for you, Amy, I need your help around the house, so I'd like you to come over as soon as possible.
After that, my mother-in-law hung up the phone on me. Alan was in the same room as me, listening in on our conversation.
I hope that my mother wasn't too harsh on you this time.
I let out a big sigh and told him what she had said to me.
I'm sorry that you have to go on your own this time. Let's make this our last visit, though. I don't want to spend any more holidays with my family.
I agree. I'd rather spend time with you alone in our home. I had visited my husband's family several times before we got married, but we talked about it and we came up with a plan to get out of not seeing his parents anymore. Until our plan could be carried out, we just have to put up with his family. It was New Year's Eve and I made my way to the house of my in-laws. As soon as I arrived, I helped my mother-in-law clean the house. I cleaned the bathroom, toilets, entrance, and cleared out the storage room.
Amy, could you do more cleaning here? It's not as tidy as I'd like it to be.
Okay, sure. My mother-in-law enjoyed making mean remarks at me. She said that my cleaning skills were poor and that I needed to put more effort into cleaning her house. If I helped her cook meals, she'd say that I was a lousy cook and that my food didn't meet her standards.
Once you're done with that, could you please set the table and have everything ready so that we can all sit down for dinner?
Yes, okay. I was the only one doing anything. Anytime I went to see my in-laws, they would make me do all the work and they would laze around. Did they think that I was Cinderella? I wasn't a servant that they could boss around, but I kept those negative thoughts to myself. I did everything that they told me to and went to sleep early that night. I couldn't wait for this nightmare to be over soon. I woke up early the next morning and drove home. A few hours later, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law.
When I woke up, you were gone. Why did you leave without saying anything? Did you finish all the chores that I asked you to do?
She wasn't concerned about my safety. She just wanted to make sure that I'd gotten all the housework done. I told her that I had done everything, but she accused me of lying to her. I asked her to check the house to see if I was telling the truth or not, and I guess she saw that I hadn't been lying because she calmed down a little after that.
What about the holiday food that I asked you to prepare last night? I don't see any food on the kitchen table.
I put the food in the fridge.
I'm surprised that you got everything done. How were you able to get it done so quickly?
I prepared the food at home and put it in your fridge so that I could concentrate on cleaning your house.
Where are you now? I didn't expect you to leave so soon. You only stayed for one night. Don't you think that you should spend more time with your family during the holidays? There's more housework that I want you to take care of today.
I then said in a calm voice, "Didn't you hear?"
About what?
My husband was recently promoted and he was going to be the branch manager of an overseas office. We were both moving to the US and my husband is already there. At first, my mother-in-law assumed that it was only my husband moving, but when I told her otherwise, she said to me,
Well, if Alan is in the US, there's no reason for you to be alone during the holidays. You should come back and stay with us. How about you move in with us until my son moves back from the US? That would be the most sensible thing to do. If you live with me, I can teach you how to be a good wife to Alan.
"Excuse me?" As always, she interrupted me and didn't listen to what I had to say.
You quit your job recently, right? If you live with us, you won't need to pay rent. As a thank you for letting you live with us, could you please tell my son to send us a total of $3,000 as a gift? He can't spend any time with his family, so that's the least that he could do for us, don't you think? Also, if he could cover the cost of our trip, that'd be great. Please ask him to wire us an additional $1,500.
I was really angry with my mother-in-law for making these ridiculous requests, but I didn't let my anger show. I was able to remain calm because I knew that I wouldn't be going over to her house ever again or give her any more money. I'm sorry to ruin your plans, but I have no intention of moving in with you.
What?
I told her that Alan had asked me to move to the US with him because he didn't want us to live separately, and he would feel much happier if I was by his side. After all, it was his first time living overseas. I also told her that we had already shipped out all of our stuff to the US, and I only quit my job so that I could move to the US with my husband. Now that we'll be living in a different country, we won't be able to come see you so often. That's why I came over on New Year's.
Why didn't you tell me any of this before? What about the monthly payments that Alan has been sending us?
I told her that we wouldn't be sending her any more monthly payments. My mother-in-law began to scream on the end of the phone. She said that she couldn't believe that Alan was abandoning his family and that his older brother always took much better care of them. To that, I said, well, you already have a great son living with you at home. Why don't you rely on him instead of your second son who seems to disappoint you all the time? We'll stay out of your life. I'm sure you'd be happier spending time with your perfect son at home. You don't need my husband reminding you about how he failed you as your second son.
As much as I love my first son, he's unemployed and already 35 years old. I don't think that he'll be able to find a job to support us.
I'm sorry, but I have to go now. I don't want to miss my flight to the US. Take care.
Wait, you can't do this. I won't forgive you.
I hung up the phone and deleted my mother-in-law's number from my phone. I was really happy to know that I didn't need to see my in-laws for a very long time. I felt like the tension in my shoulders had been released. My husband and I had been planning this for over a month. We were both so keen on cutting ties with this horrible family. Alan was sick and tired of being labeled as the bad son of the family, and he couldn't forgive his mother for being so mean to me. And he wasn't happy about sending his hard-earned money to his parents each month. When we found out that Alan was being promoted and sent to an overseas office, we decided that this was the best time for us to break up with his parents. If we moved overseas, it would be easy to ignore my husband's family. It's not like they were going to hop on a plane and come see us. And the only reason I went to see them on New Year's was because there were a few things of my husband's that I needed to pick up before we moved to the US. I flew to the US and my husband was waiting for me at the airport. My husband thanked me and apologized to me for taking care of things with his family. I didn't mind though. I love my husband and I wanted the both of us to be happy. We found out later that my crazy mother-in-law went to Alan's head office in Japan and asked his manager to have him come back so that he could be close to his family. But Alan's manager didn't take her seriously. My in-laws are desperate to get in touch with us, but we didn't give them our new phone numbers so they couldn't, even if they wanted to. And they had kicked my husband out of the house when he graduated from high school, so they didn't know who he was still in touch with, so they couldn't get his phone number through his friends in Japan either. Why didn't they consider asking their older son to get a job? Why were they so easy on him? It's not fair that they treat their two sons so differently. As for my husband, he got a pay raise, and since we no longer needed to make monthly payments to his family, we put our money down for a mortgage and purchased a house in the US. Now that we have a house, we don't plan on moving back for many years. We've settled down and made new friends in our new neighborhood. We both love our new life. And we secretly return to Japan once a year without telling my husband's family. When we return to Japan, we spend time with my family. I also recently gave birth, so the last time that I was in Japan, I was able to introduce my parents to their new grandchild. They were both so happy for us. This story is about a guy that works at the same company as me. I worked at a mid-sized company, which is quite profitable for its size. The guy that I work with, his name is Ted, and he loves to play pranks on other people. But his pranks weren't funny, and his colleagues urged him to stop. We were all afraid of becoming a target of one of Ted's pranks. One time, I consulted my manager about Ted's pranks, but his response was not what I had expected.
I'm sure that Ted's only trying to add some harmless humor to the workplace. Nothing to lose sleep over.
I realized then that my manager wasn't willing to do anything about the pranks. I suppose my manager was cavalier about it because Ted only played pranks on his colleagues and not senior management. I was trying to figure out a way to get Ted to stop misbehaving. Ted enjoyed alarming people and making them nervous. In the beginning, Ted's pranks were quite simple. He'd suddenly jump out of a corner and surprise the person that was walking in his direction. But then he got bored and started doing things that were more harmful to his victims. For example, Ted approached his colleague Sarah from the back and popped a balloon by her ear. At the time, Sarah had been holding a cup of hot coffee in her hand, so when the balloon popped, out of surprise, she ended up spilling the hot coffee onto her body and she got burned. Luckily, most of the coffee spilled onto her suit, and so she was burnt too badly. If she had spilled the coffee directly onto her skin, it would have been much worse for her. Ted didn't seem to feel bad about what he had done to Sarah.
Here's some money to get your suit dry cleaned. It was so funny watching you spill coffee all over yourself.
As for Melanie, on the day of her birthday, she planned to leave the office early, but when she got to her car, she saw that someone had taken the air out of her tires. Melanie was distraught because she had dinner plans with her boyfriend to celebrate her birthday. Ted laughed at Melanie when he saw her reaction to the flat tires. Melanie had no choice but to head to her birthday dinner by train, but she was really upset because she ended up being really late. Both Sarah and Melanie were furious with Ted, but the biggest problem was that Ted felt no remorse for what he had done to them. I had been a victim of Ted's pranks several times myself, and to be honest, I detested him. But one day, Ted went too far with one of his pranks. That morning, the employees came into work as usual. As we began to work, we heard and saw an ambulance stop in front of our office building.
There's an ambulance in front of our building. I wonder if someone's been hurt.
Let's go downstairs and check. I ran downstairs with some of my colleagues to see what had happened. We learned that one of the team leaders, Cassie, had been carried into the ambulance and that she was bleeding from her head. Could you tell us what happened? Cassie is one of our colleagues.
There was some lotion spilt on the office floor, and your colleague tripped and hit her head on the floor.
I can only think of one person who would spill lotion on the floor. We were all in dismay about what had happened to Cassie. Then, another colleague of ours came over to tell us the details of what took place. I was livid with Ted for what he had done. After Ted chose Cassie as his next target, he spilt lotion on the floor minutes before Cassie came into the room. He then held a bug in his hand and chased Cassie with it because he knew that she hated bugs. Because he knew that the lotion was on the floor, he avoided it to stop himself from falling. But Cassie, who had no idea, tripped and hit her head hard on the floor. Cassie had hit her head in a bad place and she lost consciousness. At the hospital, they discovered that she had fractured her skull. Cassie was very popular at her workplace because she was hardworking and good at her job. She was also a team player and supported her colleagues whenever they needed her help on something. We were all really worried about her condition and prayed for her quick recovery. At the same time, we couldn't forgive Ted for what he had done. He had gone too far this time. How many times did we tell you to stop playing those hideous pranks on others? What are you going to do if Cassie doesn't regain her consciousness?
Why are you asking me this? Wasn't my fault that she hit her head. If she'd been paying attention, she would have seen the lotion on the floor. She should have been more careful.
Why would you spill lotion on the floor in the first place? You clearly put Cassie in danger. You knew that she'd panic if you chased her with a bug in your hand. You did this on purpose and you need to take responsibility for what you did to Cassie.
Do you have proof that shows that I was the one that spilled the lotion? Besides, do you even know who I am? I'm the son of the CEO! You should treat me with respect.
We had no idea that he was the son of our CEO. We were all kind of shocked to find this out. I realized that Ted and our CEO had the same last name, but it was a typical name, and I never even considered the fact that they could be related.
I'm going to take over this company when my father retires. He placed me here so that I can learn a thing or two about society. I can fire you guys if I wanted to, so if I were you, I wouldn't be so critical toward me.
I now understood why my manager was reluctant to do anything about Ted's pranks. All the members in senior management knew that Ted was the CEO's son. That's why they were so easy on him. But this does not excuse the fact that Ted put Cassie in grave danger. Even if Ted's father was the CEO, I don't think that Ted could get away with something so serious. Ted seemed to think that he was in the clear though. He even threatened to fire us if we went against him. I didn't want to lose my job, but I also knew that I had to stand up for Cassie. We decided that instead of going to senior management about this, it'd be best to talk directly to the CEO. But as it turned out, the CEO already knew about what Ted had done. The CEO was on a business trip to discuss the possibility of merging with another company. He heard about what had happened to Cassie upon his return. The CEO was furious with his son. He called Ted into his office. He asked his son if there was any truth to what he had heard.
It was just a stupid prank. Cassie wasn't supposed to hit her head. I wanted to recreate something that I saw on television. You've got to be kidding me! What you did is a crime. It's attempted murder. I can't believe that you tried to hurt one of my employees. What you did is unforgivable. This company is not your playground. I need you to take responsibility for what you've done.
The CEO then punched his son in the face, and Ted fainted from the pain of being punched. The CEO visited Cassie at the hospital every day, hoping that she'd wake up from her coma. He apologized to her parents endlessly for what Ted had done to her. We also went to see Cassie in turns to check up on her condition. After 10 days of being in the hospital, Cassie finally woke up from her coma. The doctors ran some tests on her and told her family that there was no brain damage from the fall. Her parents cried tears of relief. Cassie's parents sued Ted for what he had done to their daughter and also reported the incident to the police. Ted was charged for attempted murder and he cried to his father for help, but his father wanted nothing to do with him.
You're an adult! You need to take full responsibility for what you did. I'm not gonna let you take over this company after I retire. You're unfit to manage others. You need to work on yourself first. I'm also cutting you out of the family.
Our CEO stole the stocks of the company that he owned because he no longer planned to give them to Ted. He then gave some of the proceeds to Cassie as compensation. At first, Cassie said that she didn't want the money.
You don't need to pay me any compensation. This wasn't your fault.
My son did this to you. This is my responsibility. Should have raised him better. I should have put a stop to Ted's pranks sooner. It's my fault for not realizing what he'd been doing behind my back. He put you in grave danger. I'm so relieved that no permanent damage was done to your brain. But that doesn't make the crime that my son committed excusable.
I was angry with the senior management because they knew what was going on, but they never felt the need to let the CEO know. The CEO felt the same way. If senior management had escalated the issue, Cassie's incident could have been prevented. He decreased the salaries of the senior management for a period of 6 months as punishment. After the trial, Ted was sentenced to time in jail. Cassie, on the other hand, was able to come back to work. It seemed that having a father as the CEO of a successful company gave Ted a distorted view of reality. He used his position to get senior management to listen to him and didn't make any efforts to learn the job that he was given. He promised those that listened to him that he would take good care of them once he took over the company from his father. Ted thought that money and social status could get him anything that he wanted without really trying, but he ended up losing everything in the end. I guess it was about time that he learned from his mistakes. I hope that he uses his time in prison to think about how he has wronged so many people in the past. My name is Jessica Connolly. I'm your average office employee, working full-time at a company. Our company recently had a big change and welcomed a new CEO, but all the employees were conflicted about it. He was arrogant and rude, abusing his power in any way that he could. He would decide our bonuses based on his mood and kept lowering our salaries as well. On top of that, he was completely useless and didn't know how to work. He only became the CEO because he was a former CEO's son. In the midst of that, one day, my mother suddenly passed away, and I took an emergency break from work. I explained the situation to my direct boss, Mr. Ashton, and he was worried about me and told me to take some time off, but the CEO did not agree.
Hey, Connolly! What do you mean you want to take off of work starting tomorrow with no notice whatsoever?
I'm sorry, but my mother passed away last night. I told him that I was requesting condolence leave, but instead he told me not to lie and wouldn't let me take the days off.
Don't be outrageous. I better see you in the office tomorrow morning.
Like I said, sir, my mother passed away. To be honest, I wanted to go home to my family immediately, but even then he wouldn't allow me to take the days off. In the end, he started to say,
Why are you making such a big deal over the death of one old lady?
I couldn't believe he would say such a horrible thing, and I was starting to think that he was crazy. I knew there was nothing I could say to someone like him, so within that day, I went around my department and secretly handed over my work to my colleagues. I informed them all that I would be taking a week off starting tomorrow. I never could imagine that my company wouldn't let me take condolence leave. That day, as soon as I finished my work, I went straight back to my family's home. During my leave, I got multiple phone calls from the CEO. Didn't answer once, but then he began sending hateful messages about me and my mother nonstop.
Hurry up and get back to work! Just leave the old lady. She's already dead.
I ignored all of them. Was it really necessary to send all of these messages to an employee who had just lost their immediate family? Between the shock of losing my mother and my anger towards the CEO, I decided to quit the company. The week flew by and I was finally able to get a grasp as I returned to my own house. I called my boss, Mr. Ashton, and told him how I was considering resigning from the company.
I see, so you're really gonna resign.
Yes, I can't take it anymore.
I completely understand. Even in the company, he was telling everybody not to do your work, and to leave it for you. It was quite the mess.
I'm so sorry. I didn't want to cause such an inconvenience to everyone. Apparently, he was in a particularly bad mood over the last week, and didn't want anybody to touch the work that I'd handed over. He told everyone that if he caught them going against his word, that he would fire them immediately. On top of that, he told everyone that as soon as I returned to the office, he'd be firing me.
He's been particularly harsh towards you, hasn't he? I heard that you rejected him when he asked you out.
Yes, exactly a year ago. A year ago, the freshly appointed CEO had approached me. If you get married to me, you can become a CEO's wife and you can have whatever you want. He was persistent, but I already had a boyfriend and rejected his offer. After that, his harassments towards me only got worse.
The new CEO has given us all the headache. It's a shame because the previous one was so great.
If only you became the CEO, Mr. Ashton. Mr. Ashton was a great boss and was highly rated across the company as well. People even said that it was because of him that the company got to where it is today. I'm sure that if Mr. Ashton was the CEO, the company would only continue to grow.
Actually, there's something I've been thinking about.
What is it? A few days later, I made my way back to the office for the first time since my mother's passing. I went straight to the CEO's office.
Look who it is, Connolly.
Yes, long time no see, sir.
Taking 1 week off of work without getting approval? What the hell were you thinking?
I turned in my request for condolence leave as per company policy.
I don't know what that is, but I never received such a thing.
I handed it into an employee in the HR department, but it seems he never bothered to check. Also, I saw that only half of my monthly salary was deposited into my account this month.
You took 1 week off without any approval. Obviously, your salary would be reduced.
He started spewing more nonsense. I'm pretty sure it was against the law to change somebody's salary without any notice, and simply based off the CEO's personal decision. Was he really okay with this? I wanted to get it all over with, so I turned in my resignation letter on the spot.
What the hell is this?
It's exactly what it says it is. I'm quitting.
Are you sure? If you just quit like this, you won't have any salary at all.
I have plenty of savings, so I'll be fine. Plus, I've already secured my next job. When I began to explain that I needed to start at the new company in 3 weeks, he turned his anger towards me and started making fun of me.
As if a brainless, useless idiot like you could last at any other company.
Well, we'll see about that.
You've really made a stupid mistake. If you had just gone out with me, you could have been the CEO's wife right about now.
This douchebag arrogant CEO refused to shut up, and all of my pent-up frustrations exploded. I have absolutely no interest in marrying a piece of crap like you. Plus, I already have a boyfriend who I love very much. I've never even considered you as a potential partner, in any way, shape, or form. Not only would I never marry someone who would belittle my mother's death, but I don't even want to work with someone like you.
How dare you speak like that to the CEO?
I think it's important to be honest and say what you need to say. Well then, goodbye.
Damn it. Fine, as you wish, you useless idiot.
This is just my guess, but I'm pretty sure everyone else feels the same way.
You can take those words to your grave.
Despite all this, he accepted my resignation and I left the room. I would be leaving the company in 2 weeks, so I organized the handover of my work to my colleagues and went around to all of my clients to inform them of my departure as I cleaned up my desk. 2 weeks flew by and I was officially done with this company. My new job was already confirmed, but I had some time before I started working, so I was enjoying my free days. A few months later, the CEO of my former company came storming up to my apartment.
Hey, Connolly!
What are you doing here? I'm going to call the police.
After you quit, starting with Ashton, all the other employees began submitting resignation letters. Did you bribe them all?
I haven't done anything, but I do know that everybody else was also unhappy with the company before I even left. I'm sure all the other employees were just as fed up with this CEO's outrageous behavior and attitude. Combined with the way he treated my condolence leave, I can only imagine nobody wanted to work for a company like that.
You better come back to the company immediately and convince the rest of the employees to stay. This is all your fault!
People are free to quit, aren't they? In any case, I'm no longer an employee of your company, and I have zero obligation to listen to anything you say.
Shut up! Stop messing about! I know that you and Ashton have started a new company, and you're stealing all of our employees!
What Mr. Ashton had been thinking about was starting his own company. After learning the ins and outs of the industry at that company, Mr. Ashton was planning on starting his own business. When I spoke to him about my resignation, Mr. Ashton invited me.
Would you want to come work with me?
I had always trusted him, so it was an easy answer for me. And as the other employees began to hear the rumors that Mr. Ashton would be starting his own company, they began gathering towards him. Now, our company has more than 30 employees and is starting to run like a true business.
How dare you! Look at what you've done! You better fix this!
What is there to fix? I haven't done anything wrong. Everybody has made their own decisions for themselves, including you.
I bet you tempted all the employees!
I would never, but I didn't have to anyway. Did it ever cross your mind that this may all be your own fault?
What did you say?
I tried to explain the difference between him and the former CEO. You don't consider your employees at all and do as you please in every situation. On top of that, you abuse your power and harass them constantly, and everybody is fed up with it. With the former CEO, that was never the case. The CEO would always put the company and his employees as his first priority. And that's why his employees were also able to think about the company and the CEO and work hard.
It's a given standard that employees should work for the betterment of the company.
But without that, you really don't get it at all, do you? Anyway, goodbye.
Hey, wait a second! Connolly, where do you think you're going?
I closed the door in his face, and I continued to hear him yelling nonsense outside. Another resident must have found him suspicious and called the police, and who showed up shortly after, and he was quickly escorted away in a police car. After more than 30 employees quit the company and it was no longer able to fulfill its function, the company collapsed. To make matters worse, his tax evasion was discovered at the same time, and the CEO was arrested. In order to pay back the taxes, I heard that he had to take out quite the hefty loan. Even then, he tried to set up a new company, thinking he could quickly make it to the top. But of course, it didn't go well, and he only added to his already deep debt. I heard a rumor that he's working part-time at a local convenience store now. As for our new company, thanks to Mr. Ashton's incredible skills, both internally and externally, it was a huge success. Especially since the former company went bankrupt, we were able to gain all their customers, and the business only continued to grow. All the employees are motivated and are working really hard. As for me,
By the way, what day is your wedding again? Isn't it next week?
yes, we're very honored that you'll be giving a speech.
Of course. The pleasure is all mine.
I was getting married to my boyfriend of many years, and next week we would be hosting our ceremony. I don't need to be the wife of some CEO. I was perfectly happy to be beside the person that I love. I was sad that my mother couldn't see me in my wedding dress, but I feel incredibly blessed by my workplace and by a wonderful husband, and life is great. And life is great. I was working as a regular office employee at a regular company. Given that it was summertime, our department had a refrigerator that anybody could use freely. The employees would put their water bottles and sodas or their lunches and snacks inside the fridge. Everyone could remember where they placed their things, so we didn't need to write our names on anything since nothing had been getting stolen or misplaced. The break room was also supplied with coffee packs and teas from the company, but since it was the summertime, those went untouched and most people were putting their drinks in the fridge. I would get thirsty at work too, but I wasn't a fan of coffee, so normally I would put iced tea in a bottle and bring it to work with me, or I would buy a cold tea at the convenience store and drink it at my desk. But one day, I went to my usual convenience store before work to buy a sandwich for lunch, and I found that they began selling my favorite iced matcha latte. Looks so yummy! It's a little expensive, but why not? I grabbed it along with my sandwich and drank it immediately upon getting to work that day. Much to my surprise, it tasted even better than I had imagined, with a perfect amount of sweetness but enough of the bitterness of the matcha. I was hooked. I went back the next day to buy it again, and I placed it in the office fridge for whenever I wanted something cold to drink. Since everybody else had put their drinks in the fridge and there was nowhere to place it, I put it in a little drawer meant for vegetables. I didn't get to my matcha latte since I had too much work to finish, but the next day I arrived at the office looking forward to having my favorite drink. However, when I looked in the fridge, it wasn't there. Wait a second, I know I bought it, and I know I didn't drink it yesterday. I retraced my day and was pretty confident I had left it there in the vegetable drawer of the fridge. The fridge was being used freely by countless other employees, so maybe somebody else had bought the same drink and accidentally taken mine by mistake. I didn't think much of it, so I went out to buy another one and placed it in the same drawer again. The next day, I found a familiar matcha latte cup empty in the trash can. When I opened the fridge, the full cup that I had placed in there was once again missing. Could this be on purpose? I was pretty sure it couldn't be an accident, but just in case it was an innocent mistake, I decided to write my name big and bold across the cup this time. But then, of course, I found the empty cup with my name on it in the bin again. So this time I decided to ask my colleagues about it. One of my colleagues said, "I'm pretty sure I've seen Karen drinking that matcha latte a lot recently. She took it out of the vegetable drawer in the fridge." Karen? Got it. Thanks for letting me know. The drink only costed $2.50, but for someone with a low salary like me, it stung a little bit. I didn't think it was fair for me to have to stop bringing the drink to work though, so I went straight to Karen's desk. Hey, you've been drinking my matcha latte lately, haven't you?
Huh? What are you talking about?
Someone said they saw you take the matcha latte out of the vegetable drawer and drinked it.
I had also put my matcha latte in the vegetable drawer. What are you suggesting, that I stole yours?
I'm sure if I took the fingerprints on the cup, it would be one and done. But I couldn't do that just over 1 cup of juice, and I found myself stuck with nothing to say. After that, in return, I started to get harassed by Karen. One day, my boss, Miss Harrison, came to talk to me.
You didn't turn in the paperwork that was due a couple of days ago. Didn't I tell you that this would affect your assessment?
What? I completed those documents and I placed them on your desk, Miss Harrison.
I didn't receive anything on my desk. Anyway, this is demerit for you.
But how? I knew that I'd placed those documents well in time for the due date on Miss Harrison's desk, and as I glanced over to Karen, I saw her grinning from ear to ear. I bet that rat took them. After work, I tried to confront Karen about it, but of course she refused to admit any involvement. I looked into her shredder and found my documents there, cut into 1 million pieces, but the office didn't have any security cameras, so there was no way to prove who did it. For what it's worth, our company was extremely strict about due dates on paperwork, and was a huge part of our performance assessment. That's why I was extra careful to always meet my due date, and I couldn't believe that Karen had messed with that. I wanted to get my revenge on her, so I began to think of a plan. At the same time, I didn't know what she would do to me in return, so it was hard to come up with anything. That was when a certain opportunity presented itself to me. Karen's computer had been acting up for a while now, and the company had recently renewed all of her electronics, and she was switched over to a newer laptop. When Karen got her brand new laptop, she was overly excited. That day, knowing she would be in good spirits, I bought another matcha latte and put it in the vegetable drawer in the fridge as usual. Of course, my plan was already in action. That day, I had an off-site meeting with a client in the afternoon, so I had to leave the office. But I knew that Karen would definitely take the opportunity to drink my latte again. I finished my work as usual and went to my boss. I'll be heading to the SCAT's office now.
Yes, I hope it goes well.
I reported my work and my departure to her. I left the office. After I wrapped up with the client, I headed back to my office. When I got to my department, I saw Karen standing there in a daze next to her brand new laptop. However, that laptop was covered in a black substance. Next to Karen, our department head was standing there looking less than pleased.
This is a brand new laptop! What on earth were you thinking?
I'm sorry!
As if an apology is going to be enough! This is your fault, so you'll be paying the repair fees out of your pocket!
No, I was tricked! Because the inside of this was...
As she started frantically trying to explain herself, she noticed that I returned to the office.
How dare you do such a thing? Thanks to you, my laptop is a disaster. You better compensate me for this.
What? What do I have to do with this?
Don't act dumb with me. You mixed something into my drink, and that's why all this happened. You better take responsibility.
What are you saying? I mean, that was my drink? Look closely. I even have my name written on it. Karen's face went pale as she looked again at the matcha latte cup. She must have taken advantage that I wasn't in the office and thought she could wait to destroy the evidence until after she had finished the drink. On the cup, my name was written in permanent marker.
No, I can explain!
What is there to explain? Lately, somebody has been drinking my drink without any permission, and it was really frustrating me. But I couldn't figure out who, so in order to give a little punishment, I changed the inside of the drink. I had no idea that it was you, Karen.
You bastard woman! I'll never forgive you for this! You're going to regret this!
Karen lunged at me, but our colleague stopped her and pulled her back. Our department head, who'd been standing there the whole time, finally chimed in.
Yo! Is this true? You've been stealing someone else's belongings all this time?
I was just borrowing a little bit. I wasn't stealing.
The moment she said that, she knew that she had messed up. But it was already too late. By the way, the latte that Karen had thrown up all over her new laptop, I'd actually enjoyed the original contents of. I then finagled the lid open just a little, and instead poured in some raw eggs, wasabi, soy sauce, vinegar, mayonnaise, and various other sauces before resealing the container. I then put the plastic lid over it and placed the drink in its usual spot. I had tried to drink myself to be sure, and I also thrown up immediately, so there was no denying its effect. None of the ingredients were meant to be in a drink anyway. After that, Karen kept trying to deny any responsibility, but it was already far too late for her to make any excuses. She was left with the full cost of damages on her shoulders. Of course, the reason for that being that she threw up all over the laptop, getting liquid into the keyboard and breaking it before she could even use it for one day. On top of that, in front of Karen's desk was her colleague's desk, and she caused some damages to their personal belongings as well, which she had to take responsibility for too. The cost of damages added up. In regards to her colleague's personal belongings though, I felt like I had to take some responsibility, so I went to apologize to her with an envelope of cash. She refused it, saying, "I gotta see something pretty funny, so it's okay," and laughed it off. I took this opportunity to also report the harassment that Karen had been doing to me, and Karen's bonus was heavily affected. Between that and the cost of damages for the laptop, I found her sobbing as she was left penniless. As a cherry on top, I went to go collect money from her for the matcha lattes that she had drank. "I never should have gotten involved with you." She kept whining, and I hate to admit it, but it really made me feel good. On top of that, I spoke to our department head about the paperwork in the shredder, and he took away the demerit against me, which was a huge relief. All in all, I'm looking forward to having my matcha lattes at the office in peace. One day, my husband came to me with a problem. My husband had a male cousin who was married and had a son named Alan who was currently going to elementary school. Alan was a child with many problems. He would steal money from his classmates and use violence if things didn't go his way. My mother-in-law called my husband and asked if we'd be willing to watch Alan at our house for a while. My husband tried to decline by saying that we lived really far from Alan and that if he were to stay with us, he wouldn't be able to commute to school. But then his mother said that it wouldn't be a problem because Alan wasn't going to his school anymore. It seemed that my husband's aunt was concerned that Alan wouldn't grow up to be decent if he didn't get the discipline that he needed. She felt that if Alan lived away from his parents, he would learn to appreciate them more. We also had a son who was close in age to Alan, so at first I was concerned about the negative influence Alan would have on my son if he lived at our house. But Alan was family after all, and although we didn't really want to, we agreed to let him stay with us for 1 year. Once that was decided, the first place my husband and I visited was my son's school. We needed to fill out paperwork which would allow Alan to transfer to this school. When I met Alan for the first time, I was intimidated because he had a creepy facial expression, and I was anxious about whether I'd be able to take good care of him without any issues. Because Alan wasn't used to going to school, at first he was very reluctant to go to the same school as our son. We lived in the countryside, which is very different to the neighborhood that Alan's family lives in, and Alan wasn't very happy about living here because he felt that there was nothing to do here. "I hate this place, I'm so bored." He was a total brat, to be honest, and I don't know how his parents raised him because Alan was also very picky about what he wanted to eat and what he didn't. "I don't want to eat this. I'd rather buy myself something from the convenience store. Give me some money." He had no respect for us because he would demand for money whenever he wanted to buy something. Alan's parents sent us some money each month to pay for Alan's living expenses, but we didn't want to spend their money to fulfill Alan's selfish request. "This is today's dinner and we expect you to eat it whether you like it or not." Alan didn't want to, but because he wasn't used to people telling him what to do, he ate the food in front of him. And Alan was addicted to playing games. He skipped school and played games at home all day long. My husband and I would tell him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. We had to yank the game controller from Alan's hand, and in an angry outburst, he started throwing our stuff around. In comparison to Alan, my son was an absolute angel, so I was not used to Alan's crazy behavior. I was really stressed out from having to live with Alan. I regret our decision to agree to live with Alan for a year. It was a living nightmare. But one day, I found out something shocking about Alan. Alan was taking his bath as usual, and I went into the bathroom to stock the room with new bath towels as there weren't any for Alan to use when he got out of the bath. When I went into the room, Alan had just finished taking his bath and I'd happened to get a glimpse of his naked body. His stomach and back were covered in bruises. "Why do you come in here without knocking? Get out!" I went out of the room like Alan asked me to and shut the door. That evening, I told my husband about the bruises on Alan's body. My husband was equally shocked to find out that someone had been hurting Alan.
I'm going to ask Alan about what happened to him.
After talking with Alan, my husband told me what he had learned. We couldn't believe it. It turned out that Alan's parents not only neglected him, but they physically abused him on a daily basis. The reason why Alan was picky about his food and short-tempered was because he grew up in an abusive household. Alan's parents didn't cook meals for him, and so Alan had no choice but to buy food with the money that he had stolen from his friends and classmates. He wasn't getting the proper nutrition that a young boy like him needed. The video game console was a gift from his grandmother. Another thing we found out was that the money we thought that Alan's parents were sending to us monthly was actually being sent by my husband's aunt. I now understood why Alan was such an unhappy child. It was probably his way of coping with all the pain that his parents inflicted on him. I know that it didn't excuse the fact that he had stolen from his friends or beaten them up. But I also understood that without taking money from his friends, Alan would have gone starving because his parents didn't feed him. Now that we had the whole story, I couldn't help but cry. I could only imagine the pain that Alan had endured on his own. I decided that I would put in the work and effort to help Alan open up to us. In the beginning, I didn't force Alan to go to school because he wasn't my son, but I decided that I would treat him like my own son from this day forward. Alan, you need to get up and go to school. Stop playing games. Why are you yelling at me all of a sudden? As long as you're living with us, you should consider me as your mother. I won't allow you to disobey my rules. At first, Alan didn't understand my sudden change in behavior, but he listened to me and started going to school. And on the weekends, I organized family outings so that he could enjoy the time with us. Let's make the most of the sunny weather and spend the day at the beach. It'll be fun. Do I have to go? I'd rather stay home and play games. Don't say no until you've tried it. Now let's go. That day, we had a great time as a family and even had a barbecue on the beach. Other times, we went to see the fireworks or went to amusement parks. At first, Alan wasn't enjoying himself very much, but as time passed, we saw him having fun with our son and he began to smile and laugh more. He also started to help out around the house and made new friends at school. He would spend time with his friends at the park after school. When Alan first moved in with us, he was a very picky eater, but after taking him on some fishing trips, he began to eat a variety of fish and even some vegetables. Since we lived in the countryside, most people had a vegetable garden, and so we taught Alan how to grow his own vegetables. After spending time with us in our vegetable garden, Alan started taking interest in different types of vegetables as well. I was relieved and happy that Alan had changed so much in a year. A year passed after Alan moved in with us. I don't want to move back home. I'd rather stay here and live with you guys. I suggested to my husband that we adopt Alan. I had grown to love him after spending time with him, and I didn't want him to go back to his abusive parents. My husband agreed and we decided to pay Alan's parents a visit.
We'll give up our parental rights if you pay us $100,000.
You're going to sell Alan to us for money?
Well, we can't just give him away for free. I mean, what if he grows up to be a Major League Baseball player? We regret it if we gave him up for free. Or he might end up going to an Ivy League university. I mean, you can't ask us to give up all that without some sort of compensation.
We couldn't believe that Alan's parents were asking for money when we were the ones doing them a favor. My husband and I were furious.
Why would you think that Alan could be some hotshot if you're not willing to put in any effort into raising him? You guys are terrible parents, and we can notify the police that you've been abusing him.
My husband was livid, and he told me that he was going to gather evidence to show that Alan's parents were completely negligent. We then visited the Child Consultation Center and gave them photos of Alan's body with bruises inflicted by his parents, as well as past conversations showing that they had been abusing him. When my husband first asked Alan about the bruises on his body, he had been secretly recording their conversation. The Child Consultation Center contacted Alan's former school to see how he had been when he went to the school, and how his parents were as well. And it turned out that Alan's parents didn't buy him any of the things that he needed for school, which made it difficult for him to participate in the classes. The school teachers had asked Alan's parents repeatedly to provide him with the school supplies that he needed, but they wouldn't listen. Once he had compiled all of the evidence, we reported it to the police and Alan's parents were arrested. Alan's parents didn't understand why they were being arrested and they put up a fight. They ended up getting a heavier sentence because they didn't show any signs of remorse. I was glad they weren't coming out of prison anytime soon. When we informed my husband's aunt about how Alan's parents had been treating him, she was in tears. With cooperation from my husband's aunt, Alan was able to continue living with us. Another year passed, and after filling the necessary paperwork, we were able to officially adopt Alan. Alan's grandmother offered us her lifetime savings so that we could use the money to raise Alan. But we didn't want to accept the money since we considered Alan to be our son. We felt that as his new parents, we should be the ones to pay for his living expenses. A few more years passed and I was pregnant with my second child. My son and Alan welcomed their younger sister into the family, and we were now a happy family of 5. I still remember the first time that Alan called me Mom. It's a moment that I'll never forget. I'm so happy that Alan considered us to be his real family too. My husband told me that Alan calls me Mom all the time, even when I'm not around, and I was very touched by that. Several more years passed and our children were all grown up. My husband and I were so proud of the young man that Alan had become. He was happy and confident, and that made us feel like we raised him right.
Oh, Dad, stop crying! You're embarrassing me in front of my friends!
The way Alan looked on that day reminded me of the first time that he called me Mom. When I met Alan for the first time, I wasn't sure that I'd get along with him, but after adopting him, he's become a second son to me. I'm grateful that fate brought us together.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.